FIFA World Cup, as expected, brought thousands of international visitors to North America. And while concerns about security and tourism have faded, there are growing concerns about whether Canada's overtaxed refugee system could become part of the story.
Now, Eddie, there are reports FIFA ticket holders seeking refugee protection, raising questions about whether Canada's asylum system could face increased pressure during the tournament and following the tournament. Add to that the possibility of unsuccessful refugee claimants in the United States attempting to enter Canada, and the debate quickly shifts from immigration to border management and system capacity. Why does it matter? Well, the refugee system exists to protect people fleeing genuine persecution. Canadians also expect that the system is fair, credible, and capable of handling legitimate claims without becoming overwhelmed. So, can our refugee system absorb another surge in claims following the World Cup? Should possession of the expensive FIFA tickets and international travel affect public perception of asylum claims? I've got a few words on that. And if the U.S. rejects refugee applicants, should Canada anticipate increased pressure at its own border? Now, I just want to bring up something here to further this discussion. And that is, we're going to talk about some of the pros and the cons related to this. Okay, now bring up my notes too while we're at it, because I brought in some notes, and away we go here. First of all, on the pro side, yes, Canada meets its humanitarian obligations. Genuine refugees receive protection. Canada maintains compliance with international refugee conventions, and eligible claimants may eventually contribute to the economy through work and permanent settlement.
Yeah, and that's something to be proud of.
It is something to be proud of, but the operative word is may.
Yes.
On the con side, additional pressure on an already backlogged refugee system, the increased costs for housing, healthcare, social services while claims are pending. We'll get into that one in a moment too. Greater strain on municipal shelter systems, definitely. Public concern that major international events may encourage non-genuine asylum claims. Do you think? And longer waits for legitimate refugees if overall claim volumes continue to rise. Eddie.
Yeah.
175 World Cup visitors have already claimed asylum here in Canada.
And counting.
Now, the number may seem relatively small, but it demonstrates that major international events can create opportunities for individuals seeking protection. The larger concern, though, is whether additional claims emerge in the weeks and months following the tournament.
Right.
Now, can we handle it? What do you think? Because I'll give you some...
175, I would certainly think we could, not that we should. I think we could be in a position to handle that. I mean, look, at the beginning when you put that list up of pros and cons, when I was alluding to something to be proud of, I think that's one of the things a lot of the countries in the G7 and G20 look up to Canada in terms of our openness in welcoming the peoples of the world that are struggling and are oppressed. I think we've demonstrated that quite often, and perhaps in the last government here in Canada, just way too generous. But at the end of the day, we're looked at as a world leader in absorbing people that have been persecuted in the world. I think that's something to be proud of. And I guess your question is going towards, Gary, how friendly and how nice should we continue being when there is a potential that every time there's a global event, a world caliber global event being held in Canada, that right from the get-go, I think our government should prepare to say, you know what, we should expect this many thousands of people to not leave the country when their visas expire or whatnot when they're supposed to leave. 175 claimants, I don't think should be a problem for us to handle. Um, what I'm afraid of is of that 175, how many people are just trying to take advantage of Canada's generosity for asylum seekers and those that are persecuted. Um, and, typically you'll have individuals showing up for a World Cup. Think Olympics. I mean, we're always, there's discussions about bringing some of the Olympic Games back to Canada, the Winter Olympics. Los Angeles Olympics, they're going to contend with their issues very shortly when the LA Olympics happen. How many refugee claimants are the U.S. going to get? So every time there's a world event, there is always an influx of refugee claimants. I don't have a problem with the 175, Gary. It's what what is involved with that 175? How many are real? I mean, these claimants come in, for three reasons. Opportunity in Canada, of course, valid, horrible conditions in their home country in terms of persecution, and also a lot of these countries. And after I took a look at all the claimants from the various countries around the world, there are a lot of internationally established, well-established international communities in Canada. So it makes them coming into our country that much easier, and for them to acclimatize to Canada within their communities, and then hopefully start moving towards becoming Canadians in this country. So, to answer your question, Gary, I don't think 175 should be a big deal. I have a big problem of how much of those 175 individuals that are claiming refugee status have no business claiming refugee status. Now, if you were to ask me, are we prepared enough to vet through that and send people back home that should be sent back home? I kind of question. That's where I'm not feeling very comfortable and confident, Gary, is that the majority of these might not be real refugees. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back through this a bit. Let's look at, can the system handle it? So here's what happens. Every claimant must receive an eligibility assessment before referral to the Immigration and Refugee Board. The federal government has proposed reforms requiring complete asylum applications within 60 days with the goal of speeding decisions. Even with reforms, many refugee claims can still take many months to several years, Eddie, for final resolution, depending on complexity and system capacity. Well, how complex? Either they're legitimate, coming from a country where you know that they're in danger, or they're not. It's as simple as that. Why it has to drag on through complexity is beyond me. Now, here comes even the bigger sting. Who pays while they wait? During processing, claimants generally receive access to temporary housing, often provincial or municipal shelters, emergency social assistance where eligible, health coverage through federal programs, education for their children, and eligibility to apply for work permits after meeting requirements. Now, housing pressures have become one of the largest operational challenges because many claimants remain in shelters until they secure employment or permanent accommodation. Responsibility is shared between the federal government, the provinces, and municipalities. Can we process these claims quickly? Well, here's the current process. An individual makes an asylum claim. The CBSA, or the Immigration Department, determines to or refers to the Immigration and Refugee Board. Claimant submits required documentation. Refugee hearing is scheduled. Decision issued. Appeals or removal process if applicable. And recent federal proposals aim to require more complete applications earlier, reduce incomplete filings, accelerate straightforward cases, and improve overall processing times. Boy, there are 4 lines that are so wide open you can drive a Mack truck through them. And do you
Yeah,
think they're going to change the other 7 things that I just referred to? Absolutely freaking
probably
not.
not.
As a matter of fact, they're probably going to add to the delay.
Yeah.
Now, the reality check is we cannot simply reject claims because they originated during the World Cup or any other major sporting event, even though they paid big money to get here and to buy the tickets.
Right.
Each claim must be individually assessed under Canadian law and Canada's international refugee obligations. Okay, so where do we put them? Most claimants are not detained unless they are security, identity, or flight risk concerns. And when I saw that, I went just red. You could probably see the steam coming out of my ears. Why in the hell are they even here once they're determined a security, identity, or flight risk? Get them
Absolutely.
back on a plane from whence they came, ASAP.
Yeah.
This is what's happening in Europe, in some of the countries in Europe, that now they're dealing with what you've been watching happen in Britain, even Ireland
Right.
now, the Islamic extremists taking over. Look at Spain the other day.
Yeah.
That was crazy, just crazy. Why are we keeping them here when they're declared or deemed a security, identity, or flight risk? Like,
Next plane back, or just put them in an open canoe and send them back, Gary. These individuals, they're identified, they're red flagged. You are not an asylum seeker. You are not a refugee. You are not welcome here. And you know what? I'd rather spend money on getting them on a plane back to where they came from than putting them up for the next 5 years. I'm
exactly.
I'm 1,000% behind you on that one.
It's a lot cheaper. So
Yeah.
here's how they're housed. We talked about municipal shelters and such. Federal temporary accommodation programs. And you know, you can probably go to a number of hotels. I'll get to that in a moment. So the federal temporary accommodation programs, provincial emergency housing. We are putting these people up in provincial emergency housing, and Canadians who need it and have been
Need it.
waiting for emergency housing can't get it.
Right.
Excuse me? Charity begins at home. Municipal shelters, which are overflowing thanks to the lax drug laws and lack of proper treatment programs we have in this country. No, we just give them stuff to ease it a bit. Hotels during overflow periods. Well, we must have an ongoing overflow period because I believe if you start looking around, you're going to see more than a couple of hotels across the country that are booked solid with these refugee claimants and have been for months. They've been there for months. Community organizations and refugee settlement agencies. The community organizations have enough to deal with Canadians who need help. The refugee settlement agencies, okay, they want to do something and feel they're contributing to the community and feel good about it. Good, you handle it. This has been one of the biggest financial and logistical challenges for governments, particularly in major cities where the shelter systems are already under strain. Well, if we can't, I don't care what our obligations are under international treaties, if we don't have the space and we can't accommodate them at the without doing so at the expense of Canadians who need help, then move them out. Send them back. It's as simple as that. I know it sounds cold and I know it sounds hard, but we have to get control of the system. We have to get control of how our population is, for lack of a better term, diversifying. And all we have to do is look every day now at Europe and what's happening there. And look at Britain. Britain is pretty now. Apparently, the British are starting to fight back, but they had a weak-kneed government that opened the floodgates, and you have a host of Islamic extremists who should be locked up when you see what they're doing over there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got all of this going on because we've been too freaking soft.
Do you think, Gary, we become significantly softer since the Trudeau government? My opinion is absolutely just way, way, way too much softness. I think we talked about a few episodes ago. We talked about Ukrainian refugees coming over here, and we talked about Syrian refugees coming over here. And I mean, that was clearly a unique global situation that major countries contributed to, right? And based on some follow-up documentaries and news series that actually followed a lot of these Syrian and Ukrainian refugees in our country, the majority of them are off on their own, working and contributing to Canadian society, which is what you want to see from a refugee and an asylum seeker. You know, they came here because of, obviously global conflict in their countries, horrific conflicts. And then you look at the 175, geez, they came over here because of a damn soccer game, right? Now, you have to do a significant amount more homework, and you just listen to the points you brought up earlier on, which is pretty much red tape. It goes back to my concern about these 175. Why are you here, right? I mean, why are you really here? From the list that I went through, for sure there's poverty. I mean, a lot of countries in the world. There's 280 plus countries and territories around the world. Yeah, a lot of them are impoverished. They're not Canada. They're not G20 or G7 countries. Is that justification to come into another country, knock on a door, and say, "Hey, please let me in"? I would probably think now, not in today's day and age. So, uh, you know, I want to be able to say, individuals that are here to come here honestly and do work and get at it, as opposed to just loaf around. It's hard for me to say no. But at the same time, I have to think about my Canadian neighbor, as you so eloquently brought up. We're strained. Our systems are strained here in the major cities to be able to accommodate, let alone people coming from other countries that are screaming for help that really need it. We can't even help our own people. Um, Perhaps the solution, Gary, is these people that are coming over from other countries seeking asylum. Well, they don't necessarily have to come to major cities. Let's put them out. Let's put them to work somewhere else in more rural areas. I don't know if that's a solution or not, but where does it stop, Gary? I thought it was just way, way too much during the Trudeau mandate. There's way, way too much flexibility in letting just people flood through our borders without correctly vetting them. And if they're still here 2, 3 years later, still being vetted, well, there's something A, wrong with the system, and then also B, well, how much of a refugee are you if it takes us 3 years to figure out whether you're here with the right intentions or not? I don't know, honey. I'm just kind of stuck in the middle, Gary. I don't want to be harsh and cruel, but at the same time, I have to look at the reality of our country and what our tax dollars are, where they're going, and are they being spent properly. I used to work in central Montreal. There was a Hotel de Gouverneur. I think it was a 4-star hotel. The whole complex was taken out by the government to handle the influx of refugees. And I'm just wondering how many people are still there. And I'm talking about 4 or 5 years back. How many people are still in that building? It's still being used as a refugee housing building. That's not right either. So where do Canadians draw the line? I'm kind of in the middle about this whole thing, and I want to be helpful, but by the same token, I want to be helpful to my neighbor who was born in this country. Where do you draw the line? And Gary, it comes down to our government and taking the lead in correctly establishing guidelines and fast tracking decisions to their people who administer this. Make a damn decision. We're paying you to make a damn decision. Yes, no, let's move on. And how difficult could it be to vet out somebody's genuine claim as a refugee? I mean, the individual's got to be coming here with some sort of history, some sort of paperwork. Is he being sponsored in somebody's house? Is he going to be staying someplace? I mean, these are all questions that have to be asked. And again, Gary, you're right. We don't want to run into the problem that a lot of our European colleagues are running into right now, especially in the UK. You see something happening there just about every day on social media or mainstream media. So where does it stop? And Gary, I'm kind of in between because I'm thinking about my dad when he came here in the early 50s. He came here as a refugee. Both my parents came here as a refugee. They spent time in internment in Austria when they escaped communist Yugoslavia. And when my dad came here, he had nothing. He came into Montreal. They gave him a few bucks. They basically pointed him down the direction to industrial section of Notre Dame and told him to go work. Can't speak English, can't speak French. Good luck, sir. So today's refugee and asylum seekers have it pretty good compared to the immigrants who came to Canada in the 50s. So I kind of look back and I say, you know what? It would have been nice if somebody did help my dad out to a degree to get his feet on the ground. He managed with a lot of hard work. I really wish he would have had somebody to help him out, So I'm kind of torn between not feeling and feeling, but I have to look at the security of my family, my friends such as you, and our neighbors who are struggling in the area to make ends meet, and they haven't got a place to stay. Meanwhile, we're spending thousands of dollars in hosting people that say, "Oh, I'm a refugee. I need to come over here." And you also mentioning that, yeah, these people, A, have to fly over to Canada. B, some of them had to get some sort of a visa. C, they paid for freaking soccer tickets. So how bad off can you possibly be? Did somebody raise the money for them? I don't know. Did a family member pay the expenses to come over here? I don't know. Well, if a family member paid for you to come over here, that's not a refugee claim. If I understand how this thing works. I don't know, Gary. 175, yeah. You know what? I think we could be able to handle it in the confines of our present broken model. Should we handle 175? That's where I've got a question mark. Should they even be here?
That's right. And any that are rejected in the U.S. and they start making the trek or trying to make the trek across the border, you want tighter borders? That's where we just stop them and point them right back to the south.
Yeah.
They're your problem. Deal with it.
I was looking for numbers in terms of refugee claimants for the FIFA World Cup cities in the United States. None are made available. I haven't been able to find any. I don't know about you.
I have not come across any hard numbers. There is one number that sticks out in my mind, and it goes back to when this particular issue first caught my attention. And I thought at the time there was a report that indicated as many as 3,500 might be coming our way from the U.S. at that point in time.
Oh boy.
Since then, I've heard nothing. And whether that figure was accurate or it was just being floated as a trial balloon or whatever, I've not heard any confirmation of that. The only confirmation that I have is on the Canadian side, 175 so far. Now,
what did Trudeau negotiate with? I think the Obama administration. They came up with some kind of an agreement. If anybody crosses into your country, that we have to keep them. Or am I misinformed about this? Or how did that work?
Yeah, there was some kind of agreement, and it even had a name, of course, but I don't remember what it was. And you can put money on the table right now, Eddie, that whatever it was, it's off the table.
Oh,
in the
you know
current
what? Yeah, I
situation.
forgot. Yeah, you're right.
So
Yeah. Not worth the
now,
paper it's written on.
exactly. Now, coming back to the 175 confirmed, how many others didn't bother? They just kind of, and they're out
Disappeared.
there in the wild.
Yeah.
The same as how many people have overstayed their visas. Like, this is a concern I have with the Carney government and the prime minister in particular. The minister he has in the immigration, handling the immigration file, unfortunately, she's weak.
Hmm.
And she does not seem to have a solid handle on her files when she is questioned at any of the committees of the House or during question period. And even in news conferences where she would have briefing notes in front of her, she doesn't seem really sure of herself. So he has to very quickly make a change in the leadership of that department. I'm sorry, but you know what? That's just the way it is. Sometimes you have to
Yeah.
get tough and call it the way you see it. And that she may very well have talents that would, fit in another department. Perhaps that's not under the microscope and under the spotlight the way immigration is.
Right.
So we need a change there. And I'm also very concerned when I go back to when he addressed the Canadian Muslim Association last fall, and he said Muslim values are Canadian values. The more I think about that, and the more I see what's happening in Europe with the Islamic extremists, the more that concerns me. Are they really our values, Canadian values? Is it maybe something that politically he was still kind of green and didn't really realize that that particular line could come back to bite him big time in the ass at some point? So I don't know. I have questions about that. Now,
Right.
let's just one more thing here. If they could afford, as we've discussed, World Cup tickets and the flights over here, can they really be refugees? Not necessarily.
Hmm.
The argument is intuitively appealing, but it's not how refugee law works. A couple of points. A World Cup ticket doesn't necessarily mean someone is wealthy. Some tickets were relatively inexpensive. Where?
What?
And many people save for years for a once in a lifetime event. Well, if they're saving for years for a once in a lifetime event, it can't be that bad wherever they are at the
Yeah.
moment. Why do they need to
Exactly.
seek a refugee status or asylum in Canada?
I've lived in Canada my whole life, and I couldn't afford a freaking World Cup ticket when I wanted one. Nor did I want to spend that kind of cash.
Now,
Uh,
others may have had family or community sponsors pay for travel. That's fine. And if they did, then guess what? They're now guests at your home on your dime,
yeah.
or should be. Let's put it that way. Some may have sold property or borrowed money to leave. Again, if they had property and they could sell it and pocket some cash, or borrow money to get out, how bad is it? Refugee status is based on whether someone has a well-founded fear of persecution because of factors such as race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, not on how much money they had before leaving. That said, they come back with financial means can become relevant evidence. If someone
Yeah.
claims they were fleeing immediate danger but spent weeks touring multiple World Cup cities, stayed in hotels, and attended several matches before claiming asylum, decision makers may consider, what do you mean may? Consider
Yeah.
whether
What do you
that
mean, May?
timeline is consistent with the person's account. It does not automatically invalidate a claim, but it can affect credibility.
I would hope so. I mean, yeah, okay.
So, buying a World Cup ticket doesn't automatically disqualify someone from refugee protection. But as Canadians, are we not entitled to ask whether spending thousands of dollars on international travel should factor into assessing the credibility of an asylum claim? And it's a fair question without overstating the law. Can Canada simply say, no, we're full? Legally, not to everyone. Can you believe this? Can you believe this? Legally, not to everyone. If someone reaches Canada and is legally entitled to make an asylum claim, Canada generally cannot reject the claim solely because shelters are full or the system is backlogged. Canada is bound by both domestic law and international refugee obligations to assess eligible claims individually. Well, why don't we get those international refugee obligations, those countries that are part of that, contributing to the cost of housing them here? How about that?
How
However,
about that?
we do have the tools to limit who can make a claim in the first place. For example, government can tighten visa requirements for high-risk countries. Should have been done a long time ago. Designate certain countries as generally safe, subject to legal limits. Expand information sharing and border screening. We're finally getting around to some of that. Negotiate agreements with other countries on responsibility for asylum seekers. Yeah, let's make that job one. And remove failed claimants more quickly once all legal processes are complete. Definitely. So, we're full is not currently a lawful basis for refusing or otherwise eligible asylum claim at the border. The U.S. factor? Check this. If the United States adopts policies that make it more difficult for asylum seekers to remain there, some people may look to Canada as an alternative destination. Whether they can successfully claim asylum here depends on how they enter Canada and their individual circumstances. Existing agreements between Canada and the U.S. affect eligibility for many people arriving directly from the United States, although there are exceptions and complex rules, and the current occupant of the Oval Office who cannot be trusted for 1 hour. The policy question for Canadians isn't simply should we accept everyone, it's more accurately, does Canada have the capacity to continue accepting new claims at current levels while facing housing shortages, strained municipal shelters, and an already backlogged refugee system? That's a legitimate public policy debate. And it doesn't seem to be taking place at the moment, Eddie.
No,
Other than
not at
me
all.
shooting
You're
off
right.
right now.
No, it isn't. I mean, with all look, you know what Prime Minister Carney's got his hands full. Yeah, well, that's why you're Prime Minister, right? This is becoming very, very critical and urgent. Look, you know what? He inherited such a lame duck from Trudeau's government before in terms of the amount of people he let come across. One's deservingly coming across as refugees and seeking asylum because of wars, but a whole slew of other individuals that came into this country because it was easy to get into this country. And Prime Minister Carney did inherit that. And maybe you're right, Gary. Maybe the individual that's running that's the gatekeeper of people coming into our country needs to get tough. You know what you're saying legally, we can't say no. I don't think that's the problem. I think our problem, Gary, is that we're just still too willy-nilly about the criteria and asking the relevant questions and hard questions of the claimants and then deciding, no, you don't belong here, and just don't want to send them back for what? Bad publicity? I really don't get that. If it comes down to a solid, justified refugee claim, I think Canada should continue incorporating these people in our society. My problem is just there's just way too many that don't deserve that are coming into our country. That's what I'm afraid of, Gary. Along with you, we're just, you know what? Maybe you and I should run this department. I think it'll be a very clear cut. Here, Gary, you talk to this person, I'll talk to that person, and let's make a decision based on the criteria for accurate and real qualified refugee claimants and make a decision. 4 years to take a decision, 2 years to take a decision while we have to feed and house them. That's the problem, Gary. It's the
That's a
fact that
huge
for
problem.
them, yeah, it's the red tape that's preventing people who are probably working very hard and doing their jobs on what the process and protocols are, and their hands are just their hands are just tied. They can't make decisions. So too many people coming over that don't deserve to be here, but the ones that do deserve to be here, I think we have to streamline that and make very, very quick decisions. And like I'm looking here, 20 at 175, we have 25 from Ghana, 25 from China. Well, just that 50 right there. How many of those are actually valid claims for refugee status, or does somebody want to join his sister in Toronto? I mean, I want to join my sister in Toronto is not a valid reason to seek refugee status. That's the problem here, Gary. Is our criteria is just we're just too easy in saying, oh yeah, okay, makes sense to us. Welcome to Canada. That part I do not like at all.
Right on. And with that, our takeaway is this. The real question isn't whether Canada should protect refugees, it's whether the system is prepared for what's coming.